Steven.
What's up?
I have a very important question. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. This is going to determine whether or not you really should be banned off of Twitch.
Oh boy.
They were circling Kyiv. Looks like they've like pulled back briefly here.
No, they're done. They lost. They suck.
Yeah, so
I'm not trolling. They're gone. They're not going back to Kyiv. They're gonna fucking do their weird brutalization.
okay, so the other thing, you've been talking so much about transports and
Another really common dog shit argument that people will say, Vosh will probably wheel this one out, is that most of the reason. Wow, hi, what's up? Oh my god, you look so wonderfully animated. You're making hand gestures and everything. It's awesome. But I can't hear a single fucking thing you're saying. But wow, you're communicating so much non-verbally. It's just amazing. Also, you're not live on Twitch right now, right? Okay, good job.
okay,
Oh, hi.
you should hear me now.
Yep.
I had it on push to talk because I was
Oh.
having some issues.
Okay, well.
Maybe I'll put it on push to talk again. But yes, we're back to just voice activity. Steven.
What's up?
I have a very important question. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. This is going to determine whether or not you really should be banned off of Twitch.
Oh boy. Okay.
Why the fuck are you not using your weapon art more?
You're bad at the game, and I don't want to hear anything from people that are bad at the game, okay? The problem with the weapon art, okay, I use it when I can, but the problem is that my character has very low HP, okay? And the weapon art
You've got
locks...
a tiny FP bar.
Yes, the weapon art locks you in to certain animations. So I just used it there, and now I died. The weapon art locks you into certain animations, and when you die in one hit to everything, you can't afford to get locked in. I think a lot of people will spam their weapon arts. I watch DSP do this, and you get like hit like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times while you're doing it, and there's a lot of damage. But getting locked into something with that long of an attack, usually it's better to just auto attack once or twice and get back. Okay, fuck off.
I think you're just bad.
I think you're just bad. Good one. Okay.
Okay, fair enough. So, starting off with the bad take.
Yeah, truly.
Elden
You're
Ring
off with a
with
bad take,
Elden
okay?
Ring.
DeSantis has a fucking train car in Florida waiting to stuff you and all your friends in it, okay? And then send you off to camps forever, so.
It's like you're playing Sekiro without blocking. It's ridiculous.
No, I dominated Sekiro, okay? You don't even know what you're talking about. I was an undisputed master at that game.
Weapon art, it's anime. It's essential to the game. It's cool looking.
Okay, and I use them
Uses the
sometimes.
FP bar. Okay. I'll accept it. But you should pump FP for other weapons if you ever switch off Bloodhound's Bang.
What other weapon would I switch to?
There's a lot of sick weapons. I don't know like how much you want to cheese the game. Because like you can go too extreme with them.
Well, I heard this is like supposed to be one of the best weapons in the game. Is it not?
Okay.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Have you beat the game yet?
Yeah, I've beat the game. I've beat the game on multiple characters.
Oh, okay, yeah, whatever.
I mean, I don't know. It's good if you're just like strength and dex, I guess. Which is, I think that seems to be like your preferred play style.
True.
Yeah.
The skill play style. Okay, I'm not a dirty magic spammer or whatever. Oh my god. Yeah.
There's some busted stuff. Okay, but hippy dippy. I am uninformed. Okay, I'm just an internet whore. All right, I don't know these things.
Based.
So, in regards to Ukraine, what is like the realist explanation for like American interest in Ukraine remaining like a sovereign and independent nation?
How macro and how micro do you want to get on it?
Let's just start like broad.
The macro perspective is that we don't invade countries and take territory anymore. That's insane. That's not what happens in the 2000s. That shit hasn't happened for like 100 years or whatever. That's just like not 100 years, okay, but like 60 to 80 years, okay? Like big countries invading small countries and taking their shit that's not an acceptable state of affairs. So Europe, post-Cold War, has been a relatively safe and secure place, relatively. And part of that is because we kind of have broadly changed the approach to like what countries do. And part of that part of that like equation has been like being in NATO. Like if you're in NATO, you get to be in this cool club where nobody attacks you, which is cool. That's awesome. So yeah, so broadly speaking, the big issue, our interest is that like we don't want Europe to be a continent where all this crazy fucking shit is happening, because literally nobody likes chaos, economically, politically, geopolitically, fucking ethnically, whatever. Nobody wants a huge like chaotic environment where people are invading people and stealing their territory and taking countries over and shit. So yeah, just the general state of affairs is we don't want that world to exist right now.
I agree with that in parts. So
how the fuck can you disagree with any part of that?
Well, you said that like we don't invade and take shit. Like that doesn't happen for like the past 60 years, but like that has happened with
Obama,
Ukraine, like in the past 20 years.
With
so,
wait, what?
With like Crimea, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. That's why I agree. That's why
like,
this is so like exceptionally crazy. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And so like they're launching this giant, large scale invasion. They're in like the east in Donetsk, and they're like they were circling Kyiv. Looks like they've like pulled back briefly here.
No, they're done. They've lost. They suck.
Yeah, so
I'm not trolling. They're gone. They're not going back to Kyiv. They're gonna fucking do their weird brutalization shit, and then they're gonna claim that they've won. They're gonna claim that they did it. They denazified everybody they needed to, and they're gonna sell that story to their population, and they're not going back. That's what's happening right now.
Right. It's about like saving face at this point for Putin, I think. So last time we sort of talked about this. You brought up the idea that like if we don't send weapons to Ukraine or like really invest ourselves in helping them, whether that be through like proxies like Poland or whatever, then they'll just like roll through Ukraine and into the rest of Europe.
Not into the rest of Europe, I don't think so, but through Ukraine.
You don't think so? Oh. But through Ukraine? Okay, so you're wanting, there's like a reason you don't want this like chaos, right? It's like bad for business, bad for people's lives. There's a moral, ethical reason.
Bad for Europeans, yeah.
You've talked about like the Azov battalion, and you've talked about how it's like very small relative to like the broader Ukrainian force. And the number of people who are actually like nationalists in that force are even a smaller portion. I have seen like reports of like Ukrainian nationality is really like bolstered by this sort of movement, right?
Yeah.
People are sort
Be
of
careful.
Together.
Nationalism and Nazism are two different things, right?
I know. Do you think there's any risk with like arming Ukraine to the extent that we are, that it's like a brave Mujahideen fighter situation?
No, it's different because like Ukraine is like, it's a stable government. It's not like we're just arming like resistance fighters or something. We're like equipping like a stable government that exists and like has a parliamentary body and hopefully like does democratic elections and shit, that we can like communicate with on the world stage. It's fundamentally different than just like arming terrorist groups.
So there's a lot more like communications of control or channels of control and communication with Ukraine and their military.
Yeah.
So at this point, do you think that like we need to continue sending weapons to Ukraine?
I mean, at this point, it seems like they're doing pretty well, but there's probably, it's going to depend on what the fighting in the east looks like. And I don't know if Ukraine is going to try to take back the Crimean Peninsula or not. I haven't read anything like in the past few days about that, so.
So I guess like a harder question, but like if Ukraine were under Russian control, how would that like meaningfully change or affect like the quality of lives of Americans? And you could do like long term as well. It doesn't have to just be short term.
I don't know. I'm not sure if it would meaningfully impact the lives of Americans. I don't know. It would have to be like really far out. Like there would be like kind of like maybe economic consequences down the line that we lose access to like Ukrainian markets or something if they join like certain Russian trade leagues, but
interesting. Okay.
But it's not going to be like a direct like, you know, like how does Afghanistan or Iraq affect the average American? Like it probably doesn't that much, right?
So you would say that like if we just allowed Russia to like roll over Ukraine, it's bad for Ukrainians, probably bad for like the European order. You'd say like it wouldn't affect the everyday life of Americans. Not in a
noticeable way. Yeah, not in a noticeable way.
Interesting.
Unless maybe it emboldens Russia in like future activities that end up like causing some like war that Americans are drafted into, but that's highly unlikely. It seems impossible to think that. But.
Right. I mean, I think like if anything, I expected you to give the argument of just like, well, we don't want Russia to be stronger because Russia opposes us. Just like
Yeah, but
anything that
Russia
makes
and the
them
United
stronger like
States, it
that.
just doesn't seem to be the case right now, although we live in strange times. But nuclear powers just don't fight each other. That's just not something we
Hmm.
are doing. It just doesn't happen. So
Yeah, I guess I was expecting you to make the argument more on like a soft power side, where like if Russia's stronger economically by virtue of taking over Ukraine, then they'd be able to get more allies and like, I don't know, oppose American interests abroad, whether that be in like climate change coalitions or whatever. But it sounds like what you're saying is that like it's more bad and we more just have like a ethical reason to help Ukrainians
no,
out.
it's not
It's not
ethical.
sort
It's not about even
okay.
Ukrainians, although it can be about Ukrainians if we want it to be. It's about the general state of security in the West. It's about Europe. It's about who is the leader of NATO and who is like in charge of making sure that the world is safe and secure. And after the Cold War, the general state of affairs was the United States was the head of that. And like other countries looked to us for guidance on the general state of security for Europe and for the rest of the world, arguably, but especially like in Europe. So if the United States were to allow Ukraine to be taken over like that and not intervene in any meaningful way, and when I say intervene, I don't necessarily mean like boots on the ground, but at least like making strong statements, doing like the NATO intel declassification, stuff like that. If we weren't in charge of that, then people would start to look elsewhere in thinking that like the United States is not a capable leader insofar as security goes. So it would damage like U.S. reputation abroad and maybe give us. It's hard to imagine how that could play out in the future, but like it would just damage the United States like credibility, reliability, whatever for future things that we do.
I think that might be true in this circumstance. Do you think that American credibility has been damaged by the over involvement and
For the Ukraine
the,
stuff,
no, elsewhere? So like you can apply this argument elsewhere where it's like, well, people have this expectation that the United States will stand up and step into conflict and sort of act as like an arbiter. We've seen other conflicts where that happens, where the United States steps in and they don't go as well. Do you think that's hurt
yeah,
American?
when missions go well, it makes us look really good. When missions go bad, it makes us look really bad. Just it's going to depend on the particular conflict. Everybody, because we're all young, we only remember Iraq, but you know there was Kuwait, there was Kosovo, there's Bosnia, the early parts of Libya, although the end of that was a clusterfuck. There are things that the United States gets involved in where it's like, okay, like these were good, noble, worthy interventions. Like it's good that the United States intervened here or NATO intervened here. But yeah, it's always going to depend on how the mission goes.
So it's not necessarily that like intervening is good or bad, but it's like good if it improves their reputation and we succeed.
Well,
And
that's true of like
Ukraine,
literally everything in the world,
right?
right? Is sex good or bad? Well, it depends on if you have good sex or if you get raped, right? Like that's true of like every single possible thing. Is driving good or bad? Well, it's good if we get to where we want. It's bad if we die, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So like the reason I bring this up is because some people are of the opinion that like intervention is like a default good and you have to like prove that it's not. It's like this null hypothesis, right? And I think what I'm getting from you is that like you're more sort of in the middle and you think that like if we could show that by intervening we can achieve this like very specific um, diplomatic objective that is like improving our reputation on the world stage, then it's good. Is that sort of an accurate
Yeah, I mean,
analysis
it's
of
going to
your?
depend on how well you perform, right? So I would say like one of Russia's strengths is that they were generally prior to this, Russia was very good at picking precise missions and executing on that in an effective way.
Mm-hmm.
Putin was very good at that. They did it in Transnistria, they did it in Georgia, they did it in Syria with Aleppo, and all the help with Assad. They did it during the Chechnyan civil wars. Like Putin or Russia, and then Putin more specifically, has generally had a pretty good track record when it comes to like, this is a conflict that I'm going to intervene in. This is the outcome that I want, and I'm going to effect that outcome. And if you do that, people will like you. Oh, we did it with Crimea for Ukraine. But when those missions start to go poorly, so like we're seeing in Ukraine right now, if that mission goes poorly, we would expect to see blowback in the other direction. Like I would imagine that this is going to go really poorly for Putin. I think that his popular at home is, I don't know if he can propaganda away the unbelievable failure that was Ukraine now, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the assessment that it's like it's going to be a face-saving operation where they're probably going to pull back. And do you think that they're going to get parts of the eastern Ukraine, like
I don't
Donetsk
know.
and whatnot? Okay.
I'm not sure. That's probably going to be their goal, is to,
Right.
yeah. So in Georgia, it was South Odesia and Abkhazia. Fuck, I always fuck the name up. In Moldova, it was Transnistria. But like the goal is always to like you recognize some breakaway state, you send in Russian peacekeepers there, you get a whole bunch of Russian people living there, Russian passports and shit, and then you say like, oh well, these are independent breakaway states, we recognize them as independent, but really they're kind of like controlled basically by Russia, and that's probably going to be the goal with Donetsk and Luhansk or whatever, and in eastern Ukraine.
So do you think there's any risk at this point with like continued support in Ukraine? Do you think we're like pushing it, or do you think that like at this point we're like in a more, we know a little bit more, we think that Putin's probably going to start backing off, and therefore we're not like worried that he's going to like escalate into nuclear war or something?
As long as he's not fighting a nuclear power, we shouldn't have to worry about nuclear war. Is generally the
Okay.
thought. But
Yeah,
we
'cause
go like
I
we
know
go
that.
really far out of the way to make sure that this never happens. I don't remember what it was specifically. There was like a NATO pact or something that was made, but like there is literally a direct line from the Kremlin to the White House where if somebody thinks that US and Russian troops are about to cross swords, there will be a phone call made and there will be questions of like, hey, we're about to do some shit here. Do you have anybody there? Have you seen the movie Iron Man?
Maybe a while ago.
Oh fuck! It's kind of like when I don't remember the name. The black dude calls Tony and he's like, "Hey, do you have any tech in that area? We got shit going on or whatever. Just making sure before we blast it away." Like the United States unironically does this with Russia. If we think that there might be Russian troops in an area and we've got U.S. troops in an area, we will call ahead of time to make sure that that's not the case because we don't want those conflicts happening.
Right. There's like a lot of security protocols like built up
Yeah.
because people are very cautious not to let things escalate.
Mm-hmm.
I remember earlier on in the conflict, people were worried, just because it seemed like Putin's invasion was so, rash and sort of unexpected, where like, even Russian troops were being told that like, oh no, we won't invade. It's ridiculous. It's Western propaganda or whatever. And then of course he did. And so I remember people being worried that like, if we pushed Putin the wrong way, he might take even crazier actions. And now that it seems like he might be withdrawing a little bit, it seems like that's no longer so much of a risk. Is that
He
seem right
shouldn't.
to
He
you?
shouldn't escalate past like people are saying like for nuclear war and stuff. Like that shouldn't be a thing that people are worried about. Ideally, there's nothing we can do about it if it is the case. But like, ideally, there are going to be people that are stopping that from happening. Whether it's the other Russian oligarchs, whether it's people in the military, like nuclear anything would be suicide, a death pact for all of Russia. So hopefully that wouldn't happen. But
So, if the United States didn't make an attempt to help out Ukraine in the first part, and Ukraine, if it went differently, right, Ukraine gets like, at the very least, like more of their areas taken, the conflict is still like ongoing, still uncertain and whatnot. Do you think that people would then look at the United States and say, okay, you fucked up by not helping?
if we didn't help,
Right. If we were like, as a policy, we don't have like an obligation to help Ukraine, and so we're not going to.
I think people would be disappointed.
Disappointed.
Probably,
Do you
yeah.
think it would? Do you think it would hurt our ability to achieve objectives that are beneficial to Americans on like a diplomatic or soft power way?
Maybe it would depend on. I can't predict like what the future situations that would come up would be, but like potentially.
Okay.
Like if it came
Interesting.
to like this is like super doomsday-ish or like very out there, but like if it ever came to a time when like Europe had to craft like security deals with Russia versus the United States, they might opt for Russia if it seems like Russia is more likely to keep its word than the United States would be.
Well, did we have like a word to protect Ukraine? We didn't.
I mean, like the United States is like, whether people like to see it or not, it's like Europe's big brother, and like if you fuck with Europe, especially NATO, like we'll show up and fuck you up. Is essentially like it's like the deal that the world has made after the Cold War, basically.
Yeah, definitely with NATO, and like the Western Europe, but I'm not sure that like that expectation still exists for like Eastern Europe or
It
yeah.
absolutely exists for Eastern Europe. Like
You think so?
Romania, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, like all these countries that are part of
Okay.
NATO now are like, please, Daddy America, we don't want to get fucking butt fucked by Russia coming back. Like, I think that they definitely looked at that as well.
Oh yeah, definitely those
And
countries.
then for Balkans too, right? Like the people in Bosnia that were being genocided by Serbian people in the Middle East, whether you're talking about Kuwait or if you're talking about like Kosovo, like there are people that look to the United States hopefully for some sort of intervention. Specifically the United States as well, because for some of these NATO interventions, the UN Security Council won't allow interventions to happen because like Russia and China sit on the UN Security Council, right? So in some ways you kind of have to look towards like the US and NATO to be able to do things that the UN isn't going to be able to do.
Okay. So really like the strongest argument, what I'm sort of getting from this is that like the reason why the United States wants to involve itself in some way, not directly obviously, but with like arms and support, is that kind of diplomatic soft power.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Okay, interesting, interesting. Thank you. I don't know like enough about it, but I've been reading more and I appreciate hearing your take on it.
No problem.
Okay, so the other thing, you've been talking so much about transports and I agree with you. I mean, I think yeah, I agree like with the basic premise, but I do think that like the strongest argument as far as like a fair way to approach would be that for like sports that are individualized, it's like you're not competing like um it's not like a combat sport or it's not a sport where you've got like team versus team, then you could just create like a list of everyone's like times for swimming and then allow any league to like aggregate those times however they want. So like you could create like, oh, these are all the blonde people's times or trans women or women, trans women and cis women or cis women only and so on.
I mean, you can do this in like recreational leagues. I think the issue, oh my God, comes from when we're talking about like NCAA sports or professional leagues. But like for like recreational leagues, like there's tons of people that could do this if they wanted to, right?
Right. And what I'm saying is that like you could change the structure of sport so that like everyone's times are just like combined for some of these sports.
Yeah, but then women
And
just get
then
like fucked in every single sport though, right? They're never winning anything or,
well, not necessarily. I mean, like,
yeah,
because you
necessarily,
could
right?
award them. Like, here's like, you have a league, right? Like a sports league that
Mm-hmm.
then looks at, oh, here are all the cis women competitors who competed in this event, and these are the top three, and we're going to award them like medals for that.
Yeah, but then
And then
aren't you
like,
just basically reinventing the same problem? Like people are going to say like, what the fuck is up with these awards? These are transphobic. You're just awarding them to cis women. Are we
yeah,
like
but like the league that like is awarding them isn't going to care because like that's their specific intention. They're probably created by like, I don't know,
transphobes?
specifically turf people, right? And it's like they can award people awards however they want.
Well,
And
but
like
like, what do you do
another
for like
league could
college sports where
include,
there's like a limited number of like slots for people to participate in, right?
yeah. I mean, I think that like you could just there's like a limited number of slots and it's like broken up into like male and female divisions. I think you could just create like a number extra, like you just add like a few slots, right? Trans people aren't that common. Um, and you get funding for that trans group and they can compete in sports and then they're just aggregated like all together and different people can filter them in or out.
Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. It seems like because if it gets like really complicated, we talk about making like special slots. It feels like we're gonna run into the issue of like recreating a lot of these problems. Like, let's say that we create like 4 extra slots for women's sports. Like, people are gonna view these as like you've essentially recreated the same problem, right? Because now people are gonna say these are like the trans slots because they're not treated as real women. Or like, if you're ranking everybody's times against each other, like cis women are still going to feel like they've got like an unfair competitive advantage, even if more slots were created for them. Like, it's complicated. Like, I'm not saying I have the answer. It's hard, but
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's complicated. I think there are like other reasons why you shouldn't include trans women in like cis women's sports. And I think that like the strongest argument in favor of there is just like there's a historical precedent. And that precedent is that like cis women created these categories for cis women to compete. And even if we could prove that like trans women were, fairly competing, I don't necessarily think that means that like they ought to be allowed to. Like, if you could prove that like men who've removed their toes like are able to compete with cis women fairly, I don't think that necessarily means they should be able to like compete with cis women just because it's fair. Because like these categories exist for cis women specifically.
Okay, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think there are like different, maybe better arguments for this, but I do think that like the strongest argument is you could just like put everyone's times together, and then anyone aggregates it however they want to. But yeah, those are the things that I wanted to ask you about.
Okay. Well, anything else? Are you
I don't
excited
think
for
so.
your panel tonight?
Yo, we're gonna destroy Vosh, okay? Wait, do you have any advice? Just like debate advice?
If you're gonna destroy Vosh, don't do it on anything foreign policy related. He has copied every single foreign policy take of mine, and he still copies it because he's too lazy to do any original research.
And you're just a god.
My foreign policy takes
foreign
are
policy.
just better than anybody else because I'm the only one that's willing to do like even a Wikipedia reading of anything for these topics. So, yeah, don't argue with him about foreign policy. It's probably correct because it's all gonna be shit I've told him or like said in my stream.
I'm not sure I disagree with Vosh in foreign policy.
Yeah, that's good. That means you don't disagree with me on foreign policy. What are the other topics?
The other topics are electoralism and direct action, which is sort of niche. And then also insulin, like price capping.
All of his medical insulin takes are probably going to be fucking garbage. Here's like a really important one. Do you know anything about insulin?
Yeah, I do.
A lot about insulin or like lefty information about insulin?
A decent amount because I read a few studies in like the Lancet and elsewhere.
Okay. People... You fucking loser. Hold on. Okay, people make these weird arguments about how like insulin should only be $2 each and it's like really cheap and we've been making it since like the fucking 70s or 60s or whatever the fuck whenever we invented insulin. Something that's really important to acknowledge is that the insulin that exists today is nothing like the insulin that used to be made before.
Yeah, it's improved a lot.
It's improved a ton. Okay, but people like point to this weird idea that like companies just like fake make new patents. They add like one little fucking like chemical or some shit and now it's like, oh, it's a whole new insulin or whatever, blah blah blah, but it's all bullshit to scam you. That's not true. Just don't ever let him get away with that stupid fucking talking point if he does.
Well, you can get older versions of insulin. Like you can get prescribed different versions or like
yeah, you can go buy the shitty crappy old kind, but nobody
no
would.
one wants to.
Yeah,
right?
It's fucking trash insulin. The blood spiking, the blood sugar spiking and everything is just so fucking garbage. So yeah.
Right. And it's extraordinarily expensive to actually invest in and create another or better form of insulin, to either create like a biosimilar version of the newest versions or to create like a new version. And so I think that like when people look at like the profit of insulin, they're really, it's like very narrow-minded where they're only looking at like the profit now and they're sort of ignoring like the entire research and development process, which costs, you know, billions and billions of dollars. So I think it's like very sort of short-sighted there. In regards to, I mean, like my biggest problem with capping the price of insulin is that already there's not like a strong incentive to have like new market entrants. And if you cap the price, right, reduce like the profits, I think that means that like even fewer people are willing to enter the market. And so you're going to get fewer innovations on insulin.
Sure.
And fewer copies, biosimilar copies.
Another really common dog shit argument that people will say, Vosh will probably wheel this one out, is that most of the research is publicly funded anyway. That's bullshit. There's a lot of public funding for general research, but to take general research and actually turn it into a usable drug, that's what private companies do. We don't do that publicly. That research is not publicly funded. That's bullshit. Yeah, so make sure you're aware of that as well.
I mean, that was the case with like the COVID vaccines, right? Where like, I mean, like any drug development is going to draw a lot on public research, but ultimately, like we rely on companies to engage in like risk-taking behaviors where they like pursue research and might get fucked over and often do get fucked over where they're not actually able to bring a drug to market. So yeah, I don't know. I feel fairly confident on the insulin topic. There are certain like there are better options than price controls too. Like
price controls just suck in general. Like subsidies are better. Like different government incentive program, like the orphan drug program is really cool in the United States. Like price controls is usually like It's a very, very, very
They're
big,
a blunt
like,
instrument.
yeah, very blunt to mitigate any kind of economic problem. Yeah.
Okay. I think that'll be good. Electoralism. It's very lefty focused, I think, because like I think that supporting Republicans in like the electoral process is really not good if you're like a right-wing person. I don't think this is like a viable long-term strategy. I read a poll recently that something like 16% of Americans agree with QAnon conspiracy, and not just like the broad like you ask a question, do you believe in QAnon?
But like, do
specific
Jewish
stuff.
people have like child sex ring? It's like,
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
scary
Like,
high number. Yeah, it's really ridiculous.
which is, I think it's insane. And I think like the direct action that needs to happen on the right wing is like a serious actual movement that challenges progressivism and doesn't allow people to develop these like insane conspiracy theories. So I think that's where I'll go with that. But yeah, I mostly wanted to ask you questions about Ukraine, because I don't know. I think I was just like not totally sure what the overall purpose was in like involving ourselves.
Okay.
But that's all. I need to get to a trans panel. We're going to.
Oh my goodness, exciting.
Yeah, we're just going to talk about feelings and like experiences and nothing political. And it's going to be with Vivian. And there's no way that she'll accuse me of being a fascist.
Oh
I'm
God,
certain of it.
she's easily one of the dumbest people in the history of like all of people that I've heard speak. Oh, don't ever let you guess. She has the list. There was a list. Do you know anything about that?
I don't.
Okay, people accused her a long time ago of having like a fascist list. And I guess it was like a thing that floated around. And then she's like, I don't have a list. There's not a list. People make that up. And then finally there was a show that me, Doobie, somebody else, a few other people, there was a panel we were on. And she finally admitted to like, yeah, okay, yeah. Like I worked with some organizations and like, if we would find fascists, we would add their name to like a list, just so that people knew like these are fascist cops, these are fascist teachers, these are fascist people that work. And we were like asking her on stream. We were like, okay, well, like let's say that somebody took this list. They wanted to make basically public doxes of people that they thought were fascists. Let's say somebody took this list and was like egging people's cars and shit or caused harm to them. Do you think that'd be okay? And she's like, well, yeah, of course. Like that's part of the point of like the list. You can ask your chat or my chat to like link you that. Unicorn Riot, I think, yeah. You should ask people to link you specifically because she weasels out of that so hard. And she says it's a lie that people make up about her, but she's literally admitted to that in the past, but now she denies it because she's a spineless fucking hack. But just be aware that the list was real. You might even be on the list, okay? So
probably, yeah, because I'm a far right fascist.
True.
Trans figure. Okay. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. Or I mean, Tap. I appreciate the conversation.
Unbelievable.
Have fun, buddy.
All right, thanks.